Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we'll be designing some custom bases for a frozen tundra or ice adventure for Dungeons & Dragons. I got a bunch of different sizes because I'll be doing 3 different types of minis. If you'd like to see what minis I plan on putting all these bases, that'll be a different video. I'll link it to it at the end. So, first thing we need to do, we need to prime each base with white, let it dry, then prime each base with a coat of light blue to give that icy look. We went out and bought some Deco Art Medium Crackle Glaze. I'll link it in the description. But when you put this on, if you put it on first, it'll peel your paint up. So we got to go in and cover the entire base with a thick layer of PVA glue. Once that dries, and it takes a little while to dry, you then apply a thick layer of the Deco Art Medium Glaze and let that dry, and it makes a bunch of little cracks on your base, which gives it the idea that it's ice. You can do this with a whole bunch of different colors and make lava. You can make nauseous fields, but today we're going with an ice and snow look. I ended up having to let this dry for 2 or 3 days, so after all that time, you'd think I'd have some video of it, but somehow I misplaced it, so we're just going to move on to the next step. In this next part, we're going to be using Green Stuff World's Blue Stuff, which I had never heard of until I seen a YouTuber using it for almost the exact purpose I'm going to use it for. So, reading the instructions, you take this and you put it in some almost boiling hot water for about 3 minutes. After the 3 minutes of sit, your putty has become very malleable. I used a pair of tongs to pull it out because it was still steaming hot. So after you get it out, cool down just enough to touch it, I put it into a little circle, and then you can press anything you want into it. I'm going to be using some rocks, but it seems like you could probably make 3D models out of your D&D characters or whatnot. While I was waiting for the putty, I was coming up with some ideas of stuff I could put in here that would look nice to see through. So I went out and got my Citadel skulls, and I was looking for some humans. I've pre-painted this with a prime bone mat, which I also got from Citadel. So I picked out a few choice skulls, a couple alien skulls, a couple jawbones. I grabbed a couple small rocks from outside and cleaned them up so they wouldn't get my blue stuff dirty. And then I pressed them into the blue stuff, gave the blue stuff a little while to harden up. So this is my first time using blue stuff, and I was unaware of the temperature that it needed to be malleable for longer than 2 seconds out of the water. So I went and heated up my water again to almost boiling. Then I repressed my clean garden rocks into it, and this time they actually went in, and then I gave it some time to dry. After pressing the 4 choice rocks I found outside into my very warm blue stuff, it worked. I was very surprised. So I cut it all into 4 pieces and let that dry for a little while and went and got myself a cup of coffee. Someday if I ever get sponsored, I think my first sponsor should for sure be Green Stuff World, because I use almost everything in their product line. I was very impressed with blue stuff. Having a reusable mold is quite awesome, and I plan on doing a lot more projects with this in the future. After letting my blue stuff dry around the rocks, I pulled them out. I was very surprised at the amount of detail that the blue stuff captured for being a reusable putty. So this will also be my first time using clear UV resin, so I wasn't 100% sure what I could and could not mix into it, so I figured I would just experiment. So I pulled out my Army Painter Speed Paint, Magic Blue, Caribbean Blue, and Royal Blue, and got me some plastic toothpicks so that when I was stirring around I wouldn't cause aeration with a wood one. So I filled them up with UV resin and gave them a little stir with my toothpicks to give them that ice blue color. Topped off the back with a little bit of extra UV resin. Used some tweezers to pick up a couple of my Citadel skulls and sunk them in just to see what they would look like through the UV resin. So I have a small flashlight that's a 405N curing light, but that wasn't curing fast enough and I didn't feel like holding it for 3 minutes. So I went and got a little turntable thing I have for my 3D printer that also does UV light curing. Loaded it up into there and gave it about 3 minutes on the timer. and we'll see how it comes out. So 3 minutes wasn't enough, so when I pulled this out, it was a little bit sticky, but it was really cool. I could see the skull through the clear. So I pulled that one out. I didn't decide to refill it, gave it a little extra curing outside of the curing machine, and put the other ones in for another 3 minutes. When I took them out this time, they were fully cured, and they came out with no problem. A little bit hot, so I don't understand. Maybe there's some chemical reaction that makes them hot when you pull them out. I'm not 100% sure, but I think they turned out really well, except for they're really big. So I'm going to look around for some smaller rocks. I went ahead and made a second batch of these just in case I wanted some more of these big ones later. So I made a couple batches of these with different things, different skulls, different paints, different amounts of each drop of Army Painter. I'm not sure if acrylics would work better, or speed paint, or which paint would work best, but these Army Painter speed paints worked out well enough. They kind of give that clear blue look. Let me see the skulls pretty well in it. I do recommend only using 1 drop per and giving it a little stir because they bubbled up at the bottom if you just left 1 drop on the bottom. And now we're going to test out the remoldability of the blue stuff. So I cleaned them all out, got myself some hot water, tossed them in, waited about 3 minutes, and it was malleable again. I went and found myself some deluxe crystals from a board game. Pressed them all into our newly heated blue stuff and let that dry. I was really impressed with the blue stuff. It let me clean it up really quickly and move on to my next project with almost no slowdown. I pressed the little rocks a little bit too far in and poked a hole through the back of them, but it was easy fix. I covered them up with a little bit of blue tape, and I was off putting more resin in and making more little rocks. I started having a pretty good time with this, so I ended up making more rocks than I needed. I really liked seeing the little skulls and the little bits of blue I put in. Different amounts gave me different results, but I only needed about 16 to 20 of these little rocks for my bases, so sadly I had to pack it all up. About third batch in, I was getting a little bit too ahead of myself. I ended up knocking one over with the lid of my curing machine, got resin everywhere, and had to take a moment to clean all that up. But refilling it and putting it back in the machine came out right, and decided that's enough for the day, and I'd move on to the next part of the bases. So I took a pair of scissors and clipped out a little bit of the excess resin that had spilled over onto the blue stuff. Went and grabbed my bases that we cracked earlier in the video. Went and got some baking soda and PVA glue and mixed them in equal parts. This is going to form what looks like snow on the base, so we're going to paint that around the base on the edges to look like the snowdrifts coming in, glue a couple of our special resined rocks that we made, and get those glued on. So I bring each model that I plan on using these bases for to the table. They're not painted yet, that'll be another video. But I wanted to make sure that the rocks weren't hidden underneath the model or in a weird, peculiar space. Alright, so I'm going to speed up the video here. We're going to do about 28 bases, each of them getting their own special rocks with different skulls and a coat of our drifting snow. And that's it. That's all of our bases done. I think they turned out really unique, giving each model their own separate identity when it comes to the base. That added with the paint should really make each model stick out and be identifiable on the table for our players. Thanks for going on this adventure with me. If you like what you see and want to see me paint these minis and use the bases we just made, please like, subscribe, and create.